Hi everyone. As part of the Spotlight on South Asian Women series today, I'm speaking to Krupa, who is passionate about women's health and fertility issues. This episode is purposely being released during Maternal Mental Health Week, which is a campaign dedicated to talking about mental health problems before, during, and after pregnancy. This is a really important topic because research shows that British South Asian women are statistically more likely to experience mental health issues. However, they present to mental health services at a considerably lower rate than white women. This will be down to a range of factors, but we know within the community that talking about mental health can often be a taboo topic. It's more likely to be brushed under the carpet or ignored, but that does not help the women to get the support they need. To discuss this topic further and her own fertility journey, I'd like to introduce my guest, Krupa. Hi, Krupa. Thanks for being here today and willing to share your story.
Hi, Priya. Thank you for having me.
So, to start with, please share what you're comfortable about with your fertility journey.
Sure, fine. I'll just start off with a little bit about me, just to give people a bit of background. So I'm Krupa. I originally am from Birmingham and I live in London now. I come from a psychology background and I've been working in research for over 20 years now and specialise in health-based research, which is probably why I read so much into research around fertility and mental health and South Asian women, and what's really prompted that is obviously my journey, and then that has prompted my passion in the area. In terms of my own fertility journey, sure, I'm happy to talk about this, and I've spoken about it quite a lot. My husband and I, we started trying for children in around 2011, 2012, so quite a long time ago. Our entire journey took us about 12 years. And during that time, we went through 7 rounds of fertility treatment, both in the UK and then eventually abroad. And this is, I'm seeing something that South Asian women are looking into much more now, which I can talk about later on. We started off going through the process as you do, just through doctor's checks, and everything was coming back fine. There were no issues on either my or my husband's side. I do have endometriosis, and that was one investigation area that they did in 2014, but it came back showing that it was very minimal and really unlikely to affect our chances. I then underwent a round of fertility treatment on the NHS. We luckily were able to get funding for 1 round in 2015 and 2016, and that was in London at Hammersmith. That didn't work very quickly. We found out and we moved to the private arm of the NHS. And that was really good. We had a really good experience, but again, the next round didn't work for us. And at that point, it was around 2017, I could just really feel my mental health waning, and it was really starting to affect me because at this point already it's been about 6 years that we'd been trying. My career, which I would always been very passionate about, was also taking quite a hit, and I actually decided to leave my role because I couldn't cope with the pressure. I was in quite a high pressured role looking after research for a really high profile company across Europe, and it was just too much. And so I decided to become a contractor to give me that space that I needed. We then, after quite a long break, and I would say that I have not done as many IVF rounds as other women, but the emotional impact on me was far greater, I would say, than the physical impact at that time. After some time in 2017, I just paused and we decided we would do one final round in about 2018. And that round would have meant that we'd done back-to-back cycles. So we found a private clinic after much research that was associated with the NHS still. And that was really important to me because I was really reading around ethics and procedures that they do at some IVF clinics. And I wanted to be at one which was evidence-based. And unfortunately, that treatment went very wrong, and I almost lost my life. And at the same time, I lost my job because, unfortunately, during what's known as the egg collection time, so I had all the stimulation, and then it was time to retrieve the eggs. They hit a blood vessel essentially, but what that did also was cause ovarian torsion, and so it was like my ovaries were twisting essentially, and it felt like I was having a heart attack. So that's what they compare the pain to, and it happened 4 times, and I was admitted to hospital in an emergency. It took me about 6 months to recover from that physically, but mentally I just was done with IVF, and it was just too much. And I said I would never wanted to do that or pursue it ever again, just because of obviously everything I'd been through. I told you I lost my job. Even climbing a flight of stairs was too much for me. There was such a deep recovery that was required. And so we left it. And that was 2019, though we still had to, by that point, it was 2019. So we had to transfer our embryo, which we did. And that was unsuccessful. And then the pandemic hit. And we had decided at that point that, enough was enough. And at that point, we'd also visited a clinic in India. We'd gone out to India to look at how IVF would work abroad for us because our friends had been out. But I felt mentally done. I was done physically, and I was mentally drained from IVF. And so I left it. And then at that time, I got my really important role working on NHS Test and Trace. And so that was really important to me. And I started pursuing something that was of interest to me again. That was my own career, obviously. And in 2022, a friend who had just gone through IVF again, she went to Spain. She was successful. And we just happened to have a conversation. And she said to me, do you know what? I think you could do it once more. And I think you've got this strength back to be able to do it. And it just got me thinking. And so this was now 10 years on. I went back and just spoke to my husband about it. We were really unsure. And so we started looking at clinics abroad because we just felt that we were done with the UK. And I remembered my doctor from my first clinic in the NHS. And I just happened to type his name in very randomly. And I'll go on to this on Instagram. And he just came up. And I don't know what made me type his name in on Instagram. It's just something I would probably never do. Obviously, you would do a Google search. And he came up, and I realised actually he had moved back to Greece. And so I contacted the clinic, and we actually went out to visit in 2022. And I'll talk about how important it is to actually go and see clinics later on. And I just felt very comfortable. We saw him, and we saw a couple of other clinics as well. And in the meantime, we'd already investigated India, we'd looked into Spain, and now we're at Greece. And I'd always felt comfortable with him. And I felt safe. And having been through everything that I'd been through, I knew that if I was going to go through IVF again, it would have to be with him. And then I would deal with all the logistics later. So we went through our final round in 2023. 2022, we started it. I had to have emergency surgery in 23, but we were successful. And our babies were born in 2024. So it was a very long journey. We got there after a lot of grit and perseverance, and obviously a hit on my mental health and financially as well. But yes, we ended up going abroad.
It sounds like such a long journey and so many different factors to it and different countries that you're looking at. During that time, who or where did you manage to find support? You mentioned your mental health, your physical health. What was available to you during that time?
Yeah. So 2016 or 20, 2016 was a very different time to what it is now and the way social media is used. So I originally started off by talking to friends and family, and some of my friends were going through this as well. I found that once they were successful, they really didn't want to talk about IVF. And so I almost felt like a burden, chatting to them and talking to them about what I was going through. And they'd moved on, you see. So for them, it was like, I've done that. I'm at the next stage now. And the communication became less as well. So I was feeling actually that maybe it was the fact that they also didn't want to, make me feel sad effectively, with the fact that they've actually moved on. But I just felt like that wasn't working. So I lost quite a few friends, which was a real shame. And some family members found it really hard because, like you said earlier, it's a taboo topic, and South Asian people don't know how to discuss fertility. It's just very weird. They don't know how to discuss it. But once the baby arrives, they'll discuss, the baby's here, and then they're very happy about that. But the process of getting there, they don't want to talk about. So I actually went underground, and at that time I started using Instagram. I talked about that earlier. And what I found was this really intimate, at that time, online community on Instagram, full of women going through IVF, posting and talking about it, information sharing. And it's not to say they're telling you about what treatment you must go and do. No, it was just about, I'm at this stage, this is what I'm doing, this is where I am today, and supporting each other. And these are women that I'm talking about who live in London or, across the UK, essentially. And we would have events, and we would organise events, essentially, and we would actually come together and meet up in real life. And that's who became my biggest, I would say, support network, were these women going through it, because they knew it, they understood it, they were going through our pain. And at the same time, their partners would also be part of it. So that meant that my husband could also be part of this. And Instagram became my kind of go-to. And that was my biggest support network. And we then ended up meeting people, going out with them. Some of them are our best friends now. We're guide parents to their children. They live down the road. It's weird. You can find someone who's going through IVF on your road via Instagram. And yeah, so the social media was really important. There are obviously bad points of social media, but in this case, it was really good. And then I also found, because I couldn't connect with anyone who was really going through it from a South Asian perspective, I actually am part of this really large Facebook group. There's about 70 or 80,000 women on there. And I decided that I wanted to set my own Facebook group up, because what we would do is we would post in an anonymous kind of manner. And sometimes you would get help from women who've gone through fertility, and other times you'd get women who would just say, just adopt or just relax. No, that's not very helpful. So I set up a secret Facebook group, and I started talking to these women as well, who were from a South Asian background. So this is how I was like getting my support. Obviously, my husband was there as well. And then obviously I took a break from work, but then yoga, and just making healthy food, looking after myself and my body the best that I could, were the other things I was doing for me. And yoga was something I'd been doing for years anyway. So I had a mix of, physical friends, online friends, and then looking after myself through nurturing practices, is kind of how I supported myself. And then I have forgotten to mention, but what was key was counselling. Whenever you go through IVF in the UK, you have to start off with a counselling session. All clinics will make you do it. And it's just one counselling session. It's not enough. I know. And then you have to pay for it. or you go through the NHS and you go through the standard talking therapies, which obviously aren't very helpful, because that's not what you need. You need someone who's a specialist, who understands it and will talk to you. So I was seeing a fertility counsellor the whole time to help me through it. It wasn't every week. I did it when I could afford it. But just having that outlet and taking my husband with me, so he was part of it and we were going through it together, was really important.
In terms, I'm really interested by the fact that you set up that Facebook group for South Asian women in particular, because, like we said earlier, it's not something that's discussed as much. What were you hearing from them, if anything? Were there different situations that you were hearing from them to perhaps the larger group?
Yeah, they're more so at that point. Obviously, they'll post with their real names. So that was one important thing. You would hear the real side of their story. So, for some women, it was male factor fertility. For some, it was they're telling you about them and what's going on with them personally. So those were the kinds of things that I would say you mainly heard, but also there'd be discussions of finances. How do you navigate it with the family? How do you navigate it via work? And just really them just wanting that community and that support, essentially, was what I was seeing. People who looked like them, knew their backgrounds from a similar community, coming together to talk about a really difficult time in their life.
And like we said, it's sometimes a topic that you feel that you can't talk about with your family in such detail. Some people, they just turn away, like we said earlier, they're happy when the baby comes, but that journey to get there, especially if it's such a difficult one like your own, some women just don't have that space to share. So I imagine that was quite a nice place for them to offload.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it helped them in some way. And I still give back to the larger community, and I still post. I just did a post a month or so ago about going for IVF abroad, because I'm seeing more and more women talking about wanting to go abroad and the logistics that are involved. So I just did a really long post where I was me and said, this is how you navigate going for IVF abroad. Here are some of the things that you have to think about. And if anyone needs any help, just message me and I'm happy to help you. And I guess, yeah, so whilst my community isn't used as much, it just it gives other women that kind of help at the same time.
And what advice would you give to women that are currently going through the IVF journey?
The biggest thing I would say is IVF makes you put your fertility journey, rather than just IVF. It makes you put, because that's what I called my group. I didn't call it an IVF group. I called it a route to parenthood, because you may not be going through IVF. You might be going through adoption. You might be going through fostering, or there could be a number of different things you're thinking about. And so I was very open about that rather than just focusing on IVF. I would say a fertility journey, or a journey as a route to becoming a parent, it makes you put your life on hold. And we did. And it was 12 years. And whilst my career and all of that, I was able to pick up again. Fortunately, I was able to pick up again, and I did really, I did so well, and I was so happy that I was able to pursue that. My life generally, my personal life, was on hold. I didn't travel. I stopped going abroad. And I would say that's actually a big regret. So do the things that you want to do. If you want to go on a baking course, go on a baking course. If you want to become, I don't know, a yoga teacher, go off and do that. Don't give up your aspirations or your dreams of travel because of your journey, because actually it makes you do that. It's so consuming. Everything revolves around it, and that becomes you. But you lose your identity in it, and I think it's really important not to. So that's like my biggest piece of advice. And then secondly, obviously, find people who are going through whatever you're going through, be it on Instagram, be it on Facebook, be it locally. There are so many more avenues available, and so many more apps available nowadays, like Peanut, for example. That's another really great app, where couples are seeking that support. So find that support, and it could be your family, and you could be really lucky, and have, amazing family and friends who will help you through it. If that's the case, brilliant. And I would also say, get some counselling just to help you navigate. So if you're not sure which route you're going to go on, go and get a third person involved who's an expert in the area, who can help you work through it. They're not going to advise you, but they can help you work through it. And so I think that's really important. And then find your outlets if you are going through something, and if it is the fact that you particularly enjoy art or painting, continue it. Don't give up. Find the outlets for you.
That sounds like brilliant advice, and I'm sure a lot of people will take that on board. I'm just thinking back, you mentioned about your career and how, you were going through this initially, your IVF treatment as you're working, but then you said it got too much for you, and you needed to take a break from work and you became a contractor. For someone that's going through this at the moment and they're still carrying on working full time, my question is, what would you want to see changed in companies to better support women and men? Partners, I think, are just as important as well. So if they're going through this journey, what changes do you think companies could do to support their staff?
I would say that nowadays companies are becoming very fertility friendly. And actually, I have read about so many companies in the UK, like you've got LinkedIn, the Co-op, for example. They have fertility friendly policies. And that means that they are supporting their colleagues who are going through fertility to have that time off, to have appropriate managerial conversations with their manager, or get the support that they need. So companies are now finally clocking on to the fact that they need to support their colleagues going through this. It's not the pizza Fridays which is important. No, that doesn't mean anything, or free drinks or free breakfast. No, you support your colleagues, you will actually get better employee retention and satisfaction. So more uptake of that would be really great. And then obviously, in terms of the companies, I'd like to see, and I don't know how it works in all companies, but IVF can be classed as sick leave. It's not classed as sick leave. It's actually medical leave that you need, and you're actually going through a procedure. So not having that count as against you is really important. So I'd like to see a bit more of that, more of these fertility friendly policies, and then better training for line managers would be really good. So one of my managers, he didn't know that I was going through IVF. Like, I was really lucky, actually. When I told two of my employers, who happened to be men, actually, what I was going through, they were so supportive. It was unbelievable. And one of my managers actually cried. He was so supportive. And my other manager, he also was going through a journey himself, and so was able to resonate and knew what I was going through, and was so supportive. But I feel that you need to have some appropriate training to be able to handle this type of conversation and know what it entails, because actually people still don't have a very good understanding of what IVF is and what actually happens during the process for both men and women. So I'd like to see better managerial training in place via external companies doing that training into HR, or HR doing that themselves.
I suppose often the burden comes onto the person who's going through it to explain everything to their managers, which can just feel like an additional stress, I imagine.
Yes, it is, because you have to educate them as to what's going on, and that is really hard. But also you have to muster up the courage, because you don't know how it's gonna pan out. Is this gonna work against you? Because the standard conversation is, hello manager, I'm pregnant, let's talk about the next step so I can start getting everything in motion with HR. But when you tell a manager this is what you're going through, you don't know if it's going to count against you for promotions or whatever else, and that is a real worry.
Like you said, it can put your life on hold and even your career on hold.
Yeah.
That stage when managers know that you're going through it. So it's interesting to hear that perspective. I mean, for your journey, your treatment was eventually successful after that after that long period. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes. So at 12 years on, I don't know how we did it, but like I said, we had those friends, and those were the friends who were going through it, and they're the ones that really spurred us on. So we were successful. We went abroad. I found a doctor that I trusted, and he was originally, obviously, he trained in the UK but moved back to Greece. I would say we went out to visit the clinic. We didn't just make the decision that we're going to go abroad. We visited several countries. We visited a clinic. We got to know if this was a place that was right for us and the team. And this is something I see people wanting to bypass, because IVF, you're in a rush. You need to just get on because time is ticking. But no, that time was really important. And it was also a break for us from the UK, which I would have to say. So, the treatment was successful. I'm not going to go too much into that. And I was actually a contractor at the time, because I just left Test and Trace and I needed some downtime. So I took on a less stressful role. It was successful, but I was going into a permanent role. I'd already signed my contract to go into a permanent role. So that was really like how I'm going to navigate this. My pregnancy was generally, I don't know why or how, but it was a very straightforward up until the very end, when we had quite a big emergency. It was very generally straightforward. I didn't really have many issues, thankfully. But what I did have, and given all the trauma that we went through, was deep anxiety. And the minute I told our GP that the treatment had worked, I was referred straight away to the mental health services within our area. And it just meant that I would have an assessment to see how I was doing, given everything we'd gone through. And actually, when I had the assessment, I couldn't even say that. When I talk about deep anxiety, I couldn't even say the words "I'm pregnant." Like, I just couldn't say. And throughout my whole pregnancy, I never said those words. I couldn't even wear the badge. It was too much. The one that you have for the London Underground, I'm talking about. It was a lot. And so I had an assessment, and it was an online assessment where I had to fill in a questionnaire, and I had a psychologist and a midwife assess me. And straight away, I just burst into tears. It was too much. I couldn't talk about it. Couldn't talk about what I had been through and where I was now and how I was going to deal with what I was going through. The new stage that we were at. And then I got an email to say that my assessment for that particular service I didn't qualify. And I thought that was really strange, or a text, I can't remember what it was. But then I got another email to say, but you've been referred to perinatal mental health for intensive support. So actually, the general support that they were going to offer me, it turns out, wasn't enough, and I needed a deeper amount of support. And that support, again, needed an assessment, but what it meant was that I would have a dedicated trauma midwife. I would have my own midwife throughout. So usually you would see different midwives throughout your journey, but no, I had the same midwife, and that's because we were having twins as well. a trauma midwife, and I would receive one-to-one intensive counselling every week to get me through. And the trauma midwife, her role was mainly to even get me into the hospital setting, because I was that scared to even go for a scan. So it was texting me on the morning, making sure I was on my way, letting me stay in my car and not even go into the maternity unit for scans, for example, tests or whatever I needed. I would wait in my car, and I would go, once they called me, I would go straight into the room and straight back out. And then as time progressed and we were getting closer to delivery, they would then give me some immersion therapy and support where they took me around the facilities, showed me the rooms, I met nurses, and I became familiar with that environment. But even getting into the hospital was just way too much. So we had lots of pre-calls to get me there. And that trauma just was with me throughout. But it was passed on to the doctors, knew about everything I was going through. The midwives knew. At delivery, they all knew. I had my own room, for example, and it was just to help me as much as I could. But unfortunately for me, when my boys were born, we were in hospital for longer. I had the psychologist coming to the neonatal unit and helping me through, and the midwives again helping me through. But because when they came home, it was such an intense time, the therapy was actually pulled, because they couldn't afford to keep me not going to the service to have the therapy, and they couldn't offer me online. So they actually pulled it in the end, which is such a shame, because actually I think you're really within a danger period, as they call it, for postnatal maternal mental health issues in the first couple of years after birth as well. So I think 6 to 12 months is like quite a key time, and that was the time that it was pulled. So that was a real shame.
Sounds like they gave you so much support initially. Obviously, you needed it, and it got you through that time. But afterwards, did it come down to cost and just
Yeah.
practicality, which is such a shame at the end, because, like you said, you hear so many cases of postpartum depression afterwards.
Yes.
And with twins as well, it's a lot physically that you're taking on.
Yeah, definitely. It was pulled because of costs, essentially, and funding issues for our local area, and that was a shame. They said that I could re-refer myself if I wanted to, but yeah, I couldn't do that, So again, I went back to my friends, the ones that I've made through Instagram, who are now, the same kind of life stage as me, and actually found solace in them. But yeah, I mean, they did a lot for me, I have to say, to get me through my pregnancy. I had a lot, home visits, work visits. I had a lot of support. It was actually quite overwhelming.
So, now you're in the other side, you've got your twin boys. I imagine you're back at work. What does that look like for you? How are you balancing now the career and the motherhood?
Yes. So I took extended leave. I mean, I still went back after a year, but slightly extended for my company. I currently work 3 days a week. My boys they had a long neonatal, 5 weeks in neonatal care, but we've had a number of consultant appointments after, and they still remain as neonatal consultants. And I think that's quite common with twins. So with work, I would say I've had to be really organised. I have my village. I've found my village, as they say. I've had to let go. So I've let go of the state of my house. It's a mess. It's going to be a mess. And I think me and my husband have just come to that realization that there's no point. We
Yeah.
can do surface cleaning, but we'll just have to, we just have to deal with it. I have I started having a nanny work with me very early on. So when the boys were about 6 months, because I found I actually really needed, again, my mental health. And I think, maternal mental health, perinatal mental health, the terms are used interchangeably, affects 1 in 5 women. And South Asian women, we have even a higher predisposition to that. And so I knew I needed that extra support. So I found a nanny, and she'd been working with me for quite a while. So she knew my twins. And that actually were her working with us 2 days a week, and then my in-laws being with us, who'd been with us throughout and supported us throughout. They were very familiar with my twins. So going back into the workforce, it just made it slightly easier knowing that I have this support. So 2 days each essentially from them. I've had to be really organized. Everything's laid out, for everyone the night before or the day, the week before. We're getting organized. We have to do what all other families do. You plan your meals, you plan how your work day is going to go, who's going to do what. So that side of it, the practicality side of it, is sorted. I would say though, when we're not doing a great job with our personal life, and actually doing things for ourselves. So we're all consumed with work and the boys, but actually what we now need to do is take that time out for each of us to pursue our own passion. So if it means a 15-minute run for my husband, or for me to fit in a 15-minute yoga session a day, this is what I need to be better at. I'm still transitioning back into work. It's only been about 5-6 weeks, but that side is really important for me, the personal side, because otherwise I know that my mental health will wane hugely. So yeah, I'm just trying to ride the wave as best as I can, but every day is a different day. And I read a quote somewhere, and it really helped actually. And it said that every day parents will play the lottery, because they never know. You never know if you're going to win or you're going to lose, essentially. And the lottery is, if you win, you make it to work the next day and you have a successful night and your own work and you're fine the next day. But if you lose, you've had a bad night, the next day, you're not on the best of form. So that really helped as well. I just thought it's really true. We play the lottery every day.
Definitely. And I think your experience now about trying to get that balance, so many women will relate to, so many mothers will relate to. I remember with my girls, I've got two girls, different ages, and it's just that first year, it's so intense. I think when perhaps we have those mental health struggles and you're just in the trenches, with the nappies, with the feeding, waking up at night time, it's really tricky. And I think it comes with time as well to try and carve out space for yourself and get back to the things that you used to enjoy, and almost separating yourself a little bit and saying, actually, you've got that time with your child, your children, and then that space for yourself to work on yourself. And it's so important for your mental health as well to have that bit of space and time for yourself. So prioritizing it at whatever stage you can, for however long you can, is so important. So it's great to hear that you're managing to do that, and that it is one of your priorities as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's 15 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a lot, but actually, you can put that 15 minutes off quite quickly, which is what I found, is that that will actually go to the back of the line, and anything else related to the boys will always come to the forefront. But actually, we need to do that 15 minutes, and we're struggling to do it, but we're trying.
Yeah, and look, every day is a new day. If you can say, I'm going to try for this, and it's
Yeah.
your consciousness to keep trying. I think that's really important, to not put yourself back to the back of life. And like I said, housework will always wait. It's always going to be there. That's the never-ending part. So now I just think, put myself first, and the housework can just wait.
Yeah, definitely.
Krupa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think it will be really interesting, really informative to women that are going through it at the moment, just shining a light on maternal mental health. Like we said before, the week is the 5th to the 11th of May. We said earlier there was a theme. What was
Yeah, it's your voice, your strength.
Yeah, so today we've definitely heard your voice, and the strength it takes to go through what you've been through is commendable. So many years of going through IVF, and I'm really glad it was successful for you and that you're in the place that you wanted to be. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for having me on.